let's talk about having a training partner. Do you have a training partner?
I do.
Why?
Look, it's a social thing. It's a psychological thing, right? So obviously it doesn't need to be explained that if you're doing a bicep curl, your bicep doesn't know whether there's anyone else in the room or not, right? Right. There's no way that you could say that bicep curls are more productive if you have a training partner than if you don't, right? So biologically, physiologically, biomechanically, it doesn't change, right? So what you can say is that having a training partner where you do a set and he does a set or she does a set and you go back and forth does create some pacing, right? In other words, there's more of a consistent amount of time between sets. And that tends to be helpful. If you were left by yourself, you would either maybe rest too short or maybe rest too long, depending on, whether you were distracted with a television or a book or a phone call or something else. If you're impatient and bored, you want to get it over with and you do shorter rests because you want to get it over with, you might be taking too short of a rest, creating too much fatigue, and therefore inhibiting the amount of muscle overload that you could produce. So slightly longer rests tend to be better than too short of rests. But the other thing too is having a training partner also makes us more accountable. We're more apt to show up to the workout because someone is waiting for us, right? If it was up to ourselves to just show up and do our workout, we tend to procrastinate. People tend to procrastinate. My training partner recently went on a 5-day vacation. And I'll be honest, I skipped the workouts. Now, of course, I wouldn't have skipped the workouts if I had a contest coming up, right? Or an exhibition coming up or a photo shoot scheduled. If I had to stay on track, then I certainly would not have missed the workout. But I don't have anything scheduled right now. So there's no reason to know. So what did I do? So I diverted my attention to projects that needed some time that I was neglecting. So I made use of the time. But there's no doubt that I would have worked out had my training partner been in town.
A great point talking about if he don't show up, someone else also will not go. So it's hard to find a training partner that have the same goals.
Yes, it is. But not really. I mean, look, my training partner is a little bit older than me, and he competed 2 times. He's not going to compete ever again. I'm never going to compete ever again. But I would like to do an exhibition next year. So I am planning on being on stage. He is not, but that doesn't mean that he has any less motivation to maximize his muscular development. So both of our goal is to maximize our muscular development when we work out. Now, when I say maximize the muscular development, what I mean by that is given the level that we're at right now, right? Since we have the same schedule, since both of us work out at the same time or skip at the same time. If like, for example, when we restarted 2 nights ago, we both had to take a couple of notches back and we were doing 6 sets per exercise instead of 10 sets per exercise, right? So, we both have the goal of maximum muscular development, but that doesn't mean we're going to start up again with 10 sets. Right? We got to go back to the 6 sets because we lost some workouts. We lost a little bit of conditioning. So now we're going to go 6 sets and we're going to go 8 sets and we're going to go back to 10 sets again. And as my exhibition gets closer, I will certainly go to 12 and 14 sets, maybe even 16 sets per exercise. But I like even numbers, obviously. But yeah, it's not that hard. I mean, you could have separate goals in that one wants to compete and one doesn't. But most people have more similar goals than you might think, right? So if you have a weight loss goal or you have a muscle gain goal, it's not too hard to find someone who also wants to lose weight, someone who also wants to gain muscle.
Do you use your training partner to help you finish in the last few reps?
Absolutely not. The idea of what they call forced reps, whether you realize it or not, is based entirely on the idea of fatigue. The idea that the sets that have the sets that have more fatigue, the reps that have more fatigue, are somehow more productive than the ones that have less fatigue. And that by itself as a statement is not 100% true. So if you were going to do, let's say, a lightweight or a moderate weight set with very, very high reps, then it is true that those particular reps will not be maximally productive until you get into the high fatigue range, right? So let's say you're planning on doing 50 reps. Maybe the first 40 were relatively easy. By the time you get to 41, it starts to burn like crazy. By the time you get to 46, you start to fail. Okay, those high fatigue reps are creating more fiber recruitment and therefore more muscle growth. The early reps that had very low fatigue, because the weight you were using was a low percentage of your maximum effort, produced very little muscle recruitment and therefore very little growth. So in that scenario, fatigue does produce growth. But if you're doing a heavy set of 6, the first rep is already heavy enough to create high recruitment. You're getting high growth with your first, your second, your third, your fourth, even before you get to your 5th and 6th rep. You're already getting high recruitment. You're not getting more recruitment because that particular type of training doesn't rely on fatigue. It relies on percentage of maximum effort to create recruitment. So those are 2 different mechanisms. So the idea that you're going to do a drop down set where you put that weight down and pick up a lighter one, or you're going to have a training partner assist you, which is no different, by the way, than somehow peeling the weight off, right? His assistance reduces the resistance to that set, right? So, but doing that just creates more fatigue. It doesn't create more overload because you already had a heavy weight and you didn't need any more recruitment. You already had maximum. So no, these things are misinterpretations of what we think intensity is. We think the more intense it is, the closer to failure, the more wiped out you are, the more muscle burn you experience, the more soreness you have. None of these things directly apply to muscle growth. You can get muscle growth without these things.
So you're saying there is basically no benefit from peeling the weights off,
right,
and continue the set?
That's correct. Listen, I have seen, one of my favorite examples was Dave Johns. Dave Johns was a Mr. America winner in the 70s or 80s. I think it might have been in the 70s. I used to work out at Bill Pearl's gym, and Dave Johns was a member there, and I would watch him, and he was huge. He was huge. And I would watch him. I was, 15, 16 years old, young, naive, impressionable. And I would watch him, and he would take long rests, 3 or 4 minutes. He would put a certain amount of weight on the bar or on the dumbbell. He would do 4 or 5 reps with a 6 rep set. He would stop before failure, meaning he could always finish the last rep. It might be the most strained rep, yes, certainly. But I did not see him ever stop halfway up in a rep and then put the weight down because he couldn't finish it. That would be called failure. I never once saw him train to failure. I never once saw him ask for a spot, ever. He never took each set to failure, and he was massive. And it proves the point, is that 95, 96, 98% maximum effort is all you need. You do not need 105, 108% maximum effort.
Same thing for 21s, like you do half from bottom to middle, then middle to top, and then full range of motion. You don't believe in that as well?
Of course not. Of course not. Look, full range of motion is the most productive. So when you do the first half, that's half range of motion. We do the second, the contraction part, again, that's compromise. Both of those are compromised because then you're doing full range of motion, but now you're doing full range of motion now that you've got a huge amount of lactic acid and fatigue. So now you're compromising your ability to contract the muscle with full range of motion. You were better off just doing the full range of motion from the beginning and stopping when you couldn't do any more reps or when you came close to failing.
Okay. Another option people use when they do curls, they use the dumbbells, okay? Mm-hmm. And they also hold an elastic bands.
Okay.
So by the same time, they use the weight, and then when the lever starts becoming vertical with the gravity, then the resistance curve is stretching, which increases the resistance. And the benefit of that is that you keeping the biceps always under tension for maximum growth. Is that something beneficial?
Look, the first thing that has to be explained is that every free weight exercise has different mechanics, right? So let's just say you were going to apply what you just said to a preacher curl. okay, and you have a barbell or a dumbbell, and you're doing a preacher curl, and you know that when you get on the preacher curl, when you get to here, once your forearm gets to the vertical position, you're at 0.
Right.
If you add an elastic band from that angle over there, and you replaced the resistance that was going away from the weight to the resistance that now being added by the elastic band, you could make an argument that that would make that exercise better, right? The problem is that exercise is already bad because you're getting too much resistance when your elbow is straight, right? So adding resistance to the top of that range of motion does not make that exercise good. It's already bad because you've got too much resistance in the elongated position due to the mechanical disadvantage of your bicep pulling mostly parallel to the forearm when your arm is straight. Okay, so if you were to look at a standard standing dumbbell curl and you go through your normal range of motion, as you would with my little model here. Oops. So when you curl your arm, you'll notice that if you keep your upper arm completely vertical, you won't be able to bend your arm more than that. You cannot bend, obviously there's something in the way here, but you cannot bring your forearm to the vertical position unless you move your upper arm back, right? So if you're doing a standing dumbbell curl and you do get to that 0 position when your forearm is vertical, it's only because your form is bad. It's only because you've allowed that upper arm bone to shift and let your elbow go forward, right? If you use a strict form and you keep your upper arm straight, you will have your mechanical disadvantage at the beginning, which is increasing the resistance, right? You end up with maximum mechanical load when your forearm is parallel to the ground, perpendicular to gravity. And at the same time that's happening, oops, I've got this backward. At the same time that's happening, you've got a perpendicular mechanical advantage happening with your bicep. As you continue on up, yes, you get a diminishment in the mechanical resistance, but your bicep is also losing strength at that point. So what you will discover if you experiment or you observe people is that most people don't keep their elbows back specifically because there's already too much resistance at the top of that movement, even though their forearm has now reduced its mechanical load. So adding elastic load to that exercise is ridiculous because you already know that if you use good form, you've got too much resistance. You don't need any more, right? So this is an example of someone thinking that they've learned a trick, thinking that they've gotten some unique, calculated, insight from someone who, knows what they're doing. And really, it's just juggling. It's just a trick. It's not something that will, in fact, produce a better result than a standing dumbbell curl on its own would.
Simplicity.
It's, look, a long time ago, I used to read articles by Tom Purvis. And I remember he had an exercise that he recommended where he would have you lie down on a flat bench in between a standard cable crossover machine. And you would connect right here. You would connect the ankle strap. Of course, it's really difficult to get yourself situated.
Arms?
He would have an ankle strap right here, and he would have the D-ring back here. Mm-hmm. And then he would have someone connect the cable. So when he's in the down position, he's got the downward gravity. And of course, when he gets to the top, you have 0. But now you have this pulling that's going on with the cable. So you have resistance here and you have resistance here. And all right, so you could view that as he was creating an opposing resistance at the conclusion of the range of motion that would otherwise be completely gone if you just use the dumbbells alone. Okay, clever, but does it actually produce a result? That's the question, right? And that everyone is looking for a trick. Everyone is looking for, the fix, the resolution to a problem. The fact is, when you get to the arms overhead position, it isn't a problem. It isn't bad that you have 0 resistance. if you had a little bit of resistance, like we do when we do the seated cable,
Right.
right? It's probably, quote unquote, probably a little bit better because you have some opposition, some resistance through every part of that range of motion, even though you can only tolerate resistance at the end very little, right? You don't have much strength there, right? So, but at the end of the day, you have to say to yourself, for all of this hooking up of cables and setting up this, did it make a difference? Did it really produce a significantly better? Could I even perceive any advantage? The answer, in my experience, has been no. For all the, setup and time constriction and all that, I found that particular exercise that I just described did not benefit at all. My pecs did not grow any more from adding a little resistance at the end of the range of motion. It just did not do it, right? The regular decline dumbbell press or flat dumbbell press was good enough, more than good enough. And I firmly believe that. I think that adding resistance to the end of a range of motion is really not very important. It's not very productive.
Okay. Last topic of today is about people working out now at home. Basically, gyms are closed. So there are many people like senior citizens or people 50, 60 years old who's trying to get a workout at home. And some of them, they are using elastic bands. Some of them are using weights. Some of them don't know what to do. So this subject may also interest trainers, because some of them, they will be training their clients at home. So what is the best way for someone who's 50 or 60 years old, who don't know really how to work out at home?
Look, I have a client that's 91 years old, and I train him at home. And the first thing that we have to acknowledge is that seniors have different degrees of dysfunction, right? Depending on how old they are, or depending on how well they've survived their 80 or 90 years, they may have this particular one as a knee replacement. He's got back problems. He's got balance problems. And, when I work with him, I tailor the workout specifically to his needs, right? If I wrote this whole thing out for him and gave it to him and said, here's what we do, I won't be here next month, you do it on your own, I guarantee he would not be able to do it on his own. And there's a number of reasons for this. Number one is, even though he's been doing this workout with me for years, he probably won't remember exactly, and what I mean by that is, like, he does a lot of the exercises. I have him do it on the floor. So I give him the dumbbells and he does his flat dumbbell press on the floor. Okay, that's easy enough. But if I were gone, he would have to pick up his own weights. He probably wouldn't know how to pick up his weights in a safe way. Once he's got him in his hands, as I always put him there, okay, this is familiar, but everything before that and after that isn't. Okay, so the next thing he does when he's lying on his back is he does his glute bridge, which of course he could remember on his own, and that's fine. And then I have ankle weights on him, and he does his hip flexors, and that's fine. And then I give him an elastic band. He's lying on his back, and so I'm standing back there. He's lying down, and he does a one-arm elastic band. Now, for him to do that on his own, he would have to know where to connect that elastic band, and he would have to know how far to be from it. Right? I know how much tension I need to give him with it. Right? But if I left him at home, even if he had a hook on the wall in the exact place, which he doesn't, he would have to then hook it on the wall, flip himself around, line himself up so that the hook, the elastic band, the shoulder, the elbow, the hand are all in alignment. He probably wouldn't be able to turn around and see if he's in alignment. Then he'd have to shift his body over for the other arm and make sure that this is in alignment. Then I walk around and I position myself below his feet, and I give him the elastic band resistance for the curls at the right distance, at the right angle, at the right alignment, right? again, this is the kind of thing that's very, very difficult for someone who doesn't have biomechanics knowledge, meaning the senior, to do this on his own. Now, if you're a trainer and you have a client that is a senior citizen client, and you have this biomechanics information, you would be able to do this. You would know what constitutes alignment. You would know what constitutes the primary range of motion, the safe. The reason I don't have him doing this is because senior citizens' shoulders are usually very bad. So getting him to raise his arms up even this high for this exercise is hard enough. Getting him to raise his arm, that's almost impossible, right? So the most important thing when you're training a senior is to not give them an injury and not make them feel as though they're, very unsure of the way this feels because it doesn't feel right, right? So it's a very, very difficult thing to tailor an exercise program to, let's say, 10 different seniors who all have different needs and different capacities, let alone let them try to do it on their own, teach them how to do it on their own. And unfortunately, what we see a lot of times is that seniors end up joining some kind of group class. And in being in the group class, the teacher then has to basically give exercises that are limited for a variety of reasons. One being that every one of these 10 people have a different need and a different capacity. And yet the exercise leader has to do one, has to choose something that is going to be universally doable, universally beneficial, not too easy for everyone, not too hard for some. So it's difficult, not to mention the fact that since they don't have the ability to do one-on-one, they can't give, like, how do you give 10 people elastic band resistance for a tricep exercise, right? You can't do it. You can't, unless, even if you had 10 trainers, you'd have to have them each lie down. It is really complicated. It's complicated enough for an able-bodied person to know, how to set up the pulley and where the direction of the resistance should be coming from in order to make it ideal. But, certainly I encourage those of you that are listening and those of you that are trainers who have a senior citizen clientele, everything we teach in biomechanics is universally safe and universally productive. There's no reason why you should give a 40-year-old an unsafe exercise that you don't give to a 90-year-old. Safe for a 90-year-old is safe for a 40-year-old and equally productive for both.
And for those who don't have injury limitation, do you recommend looking for a workout that is online or hire a trainer if they can?
It's always better to hire a trainer. I mean, you're looking online for information is not a good way. I mean, there's just so much misinformation out there. And there's so many reasons why there's so much misinformation out there. You could hire a trainer, but even that could be a bad idea if the trainer that you hire does not understand biomechanics, does not know physics, does not know musculoskeletal function. And unfortunately, the vast majority of trainers do not. The vast majority of trainers either have no education whatsoever. They've spent a certain amount of time in the gym doing bro workouts. They've developed a little bit of muscle. They think that, they know what they're doing. They look like they might know what they're doing. And yet they have no idea that what they're doing isn't ideal and what the best way to train a senior is, or what the best way to train someone who has some type of injury. And, sometimes with very bad consequences. So it's a tricky thing to figure out, who knows what they should know and who doesn't.
So what is your advice for someone who's looking for a trainer? Are there questions that they should ask that trainer about before they hire him?
Well, the answer to that question is yes, but it's unrealistic because the questions that the person, the potential client would be asking would be questions that they couldn't possibly know about. Like, could you imagine, let's say, a client that knows nothing about exercising asking the trainer, do you understand what alignment is? Do you understand what early phase loading is? Do you understand what, opposite position loading is? Do you understand what, reciprocal inhibition is? It's like, how would you possibly ask those questions? Those are the questions, by the way, that should be asked of the trainer in order to qualify that trainer for the job. If the trainer does not have the answer to those questions I just mentioned and others, that trainer is not optimally qualified. But how would the potential client ever know to ask those questions? They wouldn't. And this is what's so concerning for me, is because, you know, there is just enormous amount. I can't even explain how much misinformation there is out there. And people are victims of this misinformation because of commercial reasons, of the magazines that are trying to sell this and that. You know, look, a lot of these products that are sold online, if you try to search consumer comments on them, what you'll find is that those companies have created their own consumer website. And they are misleading you into thinking that these are just random comments, when in fact, what you're reading are things that company itself has created to make you think, oh, look, this person got a good result. This person never had a better workout. It's like, yeah, but, you know, does it say advertisement there? I mean, can you tell that this is a website that's created? So that's why you shouldn't just go to one source. You shouldn't just go to the one source who tells you what you think you want to hear. Right? Do extensive research. Look, and then of course, you know, the scientific documents are always better to look at too, not just, you know, the forums. The forums are obviously, you know, coming from a misguided perspective to begin with, an uneducated perspective to begin with. So it's very hard for a consumer to know that what they're getting is actually good.
Just thinking about an idea now, as you were saying this, what if we create like a PDF or a form where it has all the right questions that a senior citizen should ask the trainer, and he gives it to him to fill it up before they hire him?
Yeah. So we can give it to consumers and say, here are the questions to ask. Here's the right answer. If this trainer gives you anything other than the right answer, don't hire them. It's like an idea. We'll think about that.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, obviously, I'm putting myself in that person's perspective. If I had this, you know, whatever you want to call it, this checklist, right? And I went through the checklist. You know, some trainers are pretty good BS artists, right? And so if I, as the consumer, I know what the right answer is supposed to be, but I don't know why that's the right answer, right? I just know that's what it's supposed to be. I don't know if you could pull that off.
Right. We will.
You know, unfortunately, a lot of people, you know, they like a trainer whose personality they like.
Right.
And unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, that's also important. I mean, if you're bringing someone into your home, especially if you're someone that, you know, is maybe not very agreeable, you know, you're probably not going to want someone in your house whose personality you don't like. You know, I mean, it's not like getting a haircut. You know, you can go get your haircut. You don't have to talk to that person, but this person is going to come to your house 2 or 3 times a week. You know, you kind of have to like them, you know, and unfortunately, most trainers get hired by word of mouth, which means that, you know, a senior citizen would ask another senior citizen, hey, do you know a good trainer? Yeah, I like my trainer a lot. He's a very nice guy. Never mind that he doesn't know anything about biomechanics. He's a very nice guy. He hasn't injured me yet.
Yeah.
Okay. Good enough for me.
It's true. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. It was really informative. If anyone wants to know more about our program, of course, you'll find the links in the video description. Subscribe if you feel that this will help you. If you don't agree with us, also subscribe. Both ways.
Or let us know, and we'll answer your question for you as best we can.
Right.
Or we'll know what to address in a future video.
True. Yeah, we can do that as well. Thank you, Doug, for your time, and I will see you next week.
Always a pleasure. Thank you very much, Mo. Talk to you later.